Hey everybody, this is Perch, and I'm here with Joe. How are you, Joe?
I'm all right, Perch. How are you?
Yes, and we're joined by another Joe, a legendary Joe, Joe Staton. How are you doing, sir?
I'm okay. I'm doing good.
I'm really thankful for joining us. You've, of course, had an amazing career in comics. We're really excited to talk to you about it. But again, thank you for joining us. And
Yes.
And I know Joe and I have been excited to talk to you, Joe, for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm here.
So, kind of to break it down for us, you've had just some kind of amazing runs, and we want to get into that with you and talk about all the different great kind of memories that you've surfaced for a bunch of characters, primarily at DC. I mean, you've worked in a bunch of different areas, but you have these epic runs that people remember. It's a weird place to start, but where do you what was your favorite project to work on over all these years? Do you have a favorite, or is it all fun?
Oh my!
Sorry, go right to a hard question.
It's the I guess the things I most enjoyed. Was doing E-Man with Nick Cuddy way back when. Started doing the Huntress with Paul Levitt. And just now, I'm on Dick Tracy. So those are my three main things. It's hard to say which was my favorite of those three, but certainly that.
Yeah. And you started. Was your first assignment at DC with Paul? Was it doing? You inked Karate Kid #1, I think.
Right. I think David McElhenney wrote that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So my first assignment wasn't actually working with Paul, but I got working with him pretty soon.
Yeah.
And you started, of course, you mentioned E-Man, which was Charlton Comics, and that wasn't, you started Charlton. That E-Man wasn't your start, but how did you start at Charlton?
How did I start?
Yeah, tell us how'd you get? People are always curious, like how did this person get into comics who then had this really epic career?
Okay, well, last April last month, I got married. That was Hillary, who was just here. I'm married to the same Hillary, and we were. I've been trying to break into comics, and we were broke. So we couldn't have like any very far-reaching honeymoon or anything. So we were out. We were in Brooklyn. We headed to Connecticut to go to Mystic for a little while, and between New York and Mystic in Connecticut was Charlton Comics. And we stopped there. I had my samples. I was thinking we would stop there. We, both of us went in, and I got work. So, and that was 50 years ago.
That's awesome. Lucky charm. She turned out.
That's it. So that's how I started at Charlton.
Who were the people at Charlton at the time? Who were some of the people working at Charlton at the time when you were there?
Well, the editors I dealt with. Sal Gentili was the main editor, and George Wildman was his assistant. And I definitely hit it off with George. And George, I think George actually convinced Sal to hire me. So basically, George was my guy. And eventually, wasn't too long after that Sal retired and moved to Florida. Mm-hmm. And George needed an assistant, and he hired one of Wally Wood's assistants, which happened to be Nick Cuddy. Mm-hmm. So that's that was a good mix. I did a lot of ghost stories with Nick. I don't think I did some romances, but that was with Joe Gill. I did a lot of stuff with Joe, but I really hit it off working with Nick. And when Nick got the go-ahead from the bosses at Charlton to come up with a superhero, he gave me a call. So he figured we could do a good job on it.
It's so I just you basically got into comics. You got this start at Charlton on your honeymoon. Is that's right?
That's right. That's my origin story.
That's awesome. I love that origin story. That's really really cool. And then yeah, you got to be quite known for E-Man. That really put you on the map. People came to know your work there.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm still known for, but that's okay. That's good. I'll go with that. So, yeah.
Well, I think more than well, we're going to get into the other stuff, but definitely more than just E-Man. But then a few years later, this one I'm fascinated by. So Roy Thomas hires you to work at Marvel. But how long were you there? Because it seemed like you almost immediately went to DC. Is that right?
Yeah, I think I was at Marvel for a little over 3 years.
Oh, okay. That's not as quick as I thought. Yeah. That's good. Okay.
Roy hired me to ink the Avengers. Mm-hmm. And, then as I was settling into, I was still working at Charlton, but I was inking the Avengers as well. And I got a package from Len Wein, who was editing, and there was Hulk pages from Herb Trimpe in the package, and I was sure they had sent me the wrong package. I called Len, says, "What is this?" And Len says, "Oh, we decided you'd look good on Herb." So nobody told me, but suddenly I the Hulk on Herb, and eventually Herb left the Hulk, and Sal, who had been inking on the Avengers, took over Hulk. So there I was again, and so I went on the Hulk for a while. Yeah.
And what was it like? You're getting these pages. Was there a lot of communication with you, or like how was it like working with a company like that? And I guess, well, let me ask a different way. You're working with Charles, and you go to work for Marvel. What are some of the differences between the two? How did it feel different?
It always felt different. Yeah, I was always kind of pals with everybody at Charlton, especially with Nick, and it was I was kind of at arm's length at Marvel. In day-to-day stuff, I mostly dealt with John Verpoorten, I guess it was the production manager. And it was mostly he or one of his assistants would call me up, and if I was lucky, they would tell me something was on the way, and otherwise that I'd get it, and they'd call me up and tell me it was late.
People complain about that today. It's funny to think of it 50 years ago happening, or 45 years ago happening the same, kind of same way.
Oh yeah, I was never quite as comfortable at Marvel as I'd been at Charlton. But,
yeah.
Well, certainly Marvel was a step up, so I was very happy to be there.
What, and then you'd get Paul Levette's kind of recruit you to come into to DC. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. There weren't really enough. It seems odd these days, but there really weren't enough people to produce the books then.
Yeah. Oh wow. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So at DC, they were having various people who were fast with layouts to just kind of rough out lots of books, and people who could ink and draw it at the same time were taking them over, and that's why I wound up on Karate Kid and Rick Estrada, who could draw really fast. But there was no finish to what he was doing, so I was given that, and that was fun too. So I like that, and I kind of fit into DC more. So.
How did Paul find you anyway?
I have never really found that out. It's funny, at Marvel, Roy Thomas called up, when I was at Charlton, and Roy called up and says, "You want to make the Avengers?" And I says, "Yay!" And he says, "Okay, they're on the way." And but I caught Roy at Heroes Con a couple of years ago and asked him why did he hire me? We hadn't had any contact, and he says, "Golly, Joe, I don't have any idea. We must have been desperate." Well, I think it must have been the same thing with Paul. He called me up, out of the blue, and I didn't really fit at Marvel, and DC was offering a bit more money, and so I was perfectly happy to make the switch to try that. And from the first time I went in, I hit it off real well with Paul and the kind of the gang who were around him at DC. So
nice.
I just kind of basically I worked at DC most of the time. I came and went, but that was pretty much it.
Nice. I know Paul was an Avengers fan, so I'm curious if maybe he saw your name in the Avengers or was aware that you were working on that, and maybe that's how he was aware of you. I mean, he's someone we could probably just reach out to and ask, but
probably could. And now that I'm thinking about it, I know that when I was showing my samples around, I had taken Avengers samples into DC and had shown them to Joe Orlando.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So things get passed around, and I imagine that's what happened. But somehow Paul was aware of me, and they were recruiting. So.
Yeah, that's great.
You wound up getting on some pretty significant stories. The origin of the JSA. And I mean, just some very memorable stories. Been reprinted at least a few times for sure. So you mentioned, so DC is maybe a more friendly at that time. You just found that the style worked with you. You're able to kind of meld into the office a little easier.
Yeah, and there were just people there I liked being around. Paul Levitz, Paul Kupperberg, Marty Masco, Bob Smith. There was always somebody to hang out with. Yeah, everybody talks about. In the old days when they'd hang out at Marvel, I never fit into a group to hang out with at Marvel. But at DC, I kind of found my own gang fairly early, and it was nice to go in and see the gang. So. Yeah.
And who were some of the editors at DC you ended up working with around that time?
Well, it's funny. I was saying I worked for Len Wein at Marvel, but I also worked for Len at DC.
Mm-hmm.
But I worked for Paul was editing. Well, what was he? He was not really editing. He was story editing. Anyway, he was kind of in charge of everything. So I did a lot of stuff for him. Jack Harris. I did. Later, I did Green Lantern for Jack Harris.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, and Joe Orlando. Joe was editing the JSA. I did a lot of stuff with Joe. I like Joe Orlando a lot.
Yeah.
You're responsible for killing Batman.
I am. Well, Paul Levitz is responsible for killing. I was just kind of what would you who's the guy who helps you kill somebody?
Well, you're the accomplice. You're
accomplice. Yeah.
The accomplice. Yes.
You're visualizing the death. That is that's a puts you in a very rare category of creators, though. Is somebody who actually can say I was able to kill Batman,
and he's still dead.
And he's still dead. Yeah, that's even more rare.
Well, I'm not sure. I haven't really kept up with what's happened since the New 52, so he may be back. But last I looked, he was still dead.
I think Earth 2 Batman is still dead. I think you've still got that one that you basically on. Well, you mentioned earlier the Huntress. Tell us about how that came down. Like, how'd you got into that title? This was one you really enjoyed?
Yeah, I have really fit on the All-Star, the JSA stuff, everything on Earth 2. I've seemed to fit there. I had been originally assigned with Wally Wood was going to be doing finishes on my layouts, and that's when Wally disappeared and went west, and so Paul Levitz, Bob Layton had been working for Wally Wood at a while, so he was brought in to ink my JSA stuff. So that was the transition there, and since Bob was around, and we had the new character Power Girl, who was Earth 2 version of Supergirl. She was now a member of the JSA. But basically, she was like this young girl who was surrounded by a bunch of old guys.
Nothing weird about that. No.
Yeah.
But Bob thought that she should have another young woman to talk to. I mean, she doesn't just want to talk to these middle-aged superheroes. There's not much she could talk to Wildcat about, but so that was the motivation that led to the Huntress, and I think
a funny origin story.
Yeah.
It's everybody winds up in this. I suggested that she be a Earth 2 version of Batgirl. But Paul had never particularly liked Batgirl and thought she was, just an artificial character created for the TV show. So that was where he was headed, but he didn't really like it. And at the time, Jeanette Kahn, who was the head of DC, had these meetings at her apartment after hours, where the staff would come get together and play board games. This was some kind of
nice
team building exercise. That was kind of big at the time. And at one of these meetings, Paul was complaining about he didn't know where to go with the character. We hadn't really settled on her yet, and Anthony Tolan, who was the colorist on our book, was there, and he says, "Oh, well, how about she's the daughter of Batman and Catwoman? That's different," and Paul picked up on that. So rather than Batgirl, she became the Huntress, not Commissioner Gordon's niece or anybody, but a member of Batman's family. And Paul came up with a whole tragic origin story, and so it just kind of went from there. She was a very organic character once she was going.
I love that hit. So basically, what you're saying is that the Huntress is a combo of brainstorming game night at Jeanette Kahn's apartment and the need to have somebody for Power Girl to talk to.
Exactly. Yeah.
Secret origin. I love that.
So what I designed the costume for Helena Wayne. Her costume is a mesh of Batman's costume and Catwoman's. The colors, if you'll notice, there's the gray and the definitely the purple. You've always got to have some purple. So she's basically gives homage to her beginnings. And when I was taking in the designs I had for the character, Joe Orlando was the I guess Joe was the art. No, Joe was he was editor. Yeah, he was a main editor at the time, and I was going over those, and Joe says at the time I hadn't quite finished the cape, and Joe said, it's got to have the Batman scallop on the cape. So that's from Joe. So we have this whole group of people who contributed to the Huntress. So it's it kind of all came together.
And oddly enough, Huntress, for not being like a Justice League staple type character, has been adapted in a lot of cartoons and TV shows. She's been in. She was in the Birds of Prey TV show, the Birds of Prey movie. She's in the Arrowverse. Have you ever checked any of that stuff out? Have you ever seen like adaptions of her or anything like that?
Yeah, I've seen several of them. But the thing you have to bear in mind is a lot of the versions of the Huntress that followed the original Huntress was killed during the crisis.
Right.
But we thought we needed to keep that character around. And Joey Cavalieri had been writing some of the backup stories for the Helena Wayne character before she had a wall fall on her. That's how she died during the crisis. But Joey developed a new character, Helena Bertinelli, a mob daughter, with a different take on the character, but enough of the old one, and still with a purple costume.
Yeah.
So it's the Helena Bertinelli character who's picked up mostly, I think, was on the Arrow show and was in the Birds of Prey movie.
Yeah.
The Helena Wayne character has been on the TV animation several times.
Yeah.
Brave and the Bold. I don't know. It's hard to keep up with which Batman animation it is at the time, but she's been in the animation with Batman.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about that character, we've seen lots of different costume changes over the years, but to Joe's point, the character has shown up in a lot of different forms of media, and they do try to the initial visual look of the character. They've tried to keep consistent. It has held up over the years, even very, very different forms. They at least try to kind of bring it together. Probably Birds of Prey, the movie, was a pretty far distance from that, but many of the others, they've tried.
I really like their version of the Huntress. So even if her superhero name actually was the Crossbow Killer, I like that version.
Yeah.
It was, but it's impressive, and I think to your credit that the visual style of this character that you designed wound up being so everlasting. I mean, it's really held up, and the costume, and I like the I'd assume most people know this, but that kind of connection of Batman and Catwoman both coming into the visual look of the character is it's subtle, but it's there, and I think that's great. You did a great job with that character.
Thank you. I do think she's held up.
Yeah, oh no, absolutely. And you've done other things. You co-created the Omega Men, not the Mega Man. That's a very different thing. You co-created the Omega Men with Marv Wolfman.
With Marv, yeah. So.
How was that? I mean, that's another, the Omega Men, which has had various kind of comebacks over the years. What was the story? What was the story behind that?
Well, that was strictly Marv's idea. He thought DC needed more superhero teams. Maybe this would eventually be an X-Men type group. They were all aliens and different character designs. So I worked from Marv's designs, Marv's descriptions. So I came up with a bunch of stuff there. And I think the only real change Marv made from my original designs is that the leader of the Omega Men was, let's see, I have forgotten his Primus. His name.
Yes.
And I had originally designed him as a bald-headed guy. And Marv said, that would never go. That nobody accepts a bald-headed guy as being in command.
Yeah, you can't have a bald-headed commander in space. That would never work.
So I redesigned it with like nice flowing hair, and Marv approved of that, and we were good to go. So we had a good take the start in Green Lantern for them.
Nice.
When you're creating these characters, I'm always, I think different people have different styles, but you hear a little bit about the premise. We want to kind of do this with the character. We want to put these things together. Like, what's your process? Do you kind of go off in isolation and start to sketch some things together? Do you bounce a lot of ideas off people? Like, you've created so many characters and costumes and designs. Like, how do you do it?
Well, for me, it's the writer would give me suggestions, directions on what the character should kind of embody. Sometimes it was pretty extensive, and sometimes it's just very general. And for E-Man, Nick Cuddy wanted somebody who looked like energy, but had E equals MC squared on his chest as an emblem. And imagine when you're given that as a direction. So. we
want a formula on his chest, and he needs to look like energy.
Yes. So, and sometimes you have more more specific directions. Steve Engel had didn't have sketches for me for like Kilowog, but he had a definite idea what he wanted Kilowog to look like, and I took Steve's directions, and once he told me what the character what he was embodying, the strength, but still kind of gentle. I kind of pulled that all together.
Between what I'm struck by here is but there's, of course, DC has relaunched a few times. We had several crises. We had the New 52, and we have Infinite Frontier, and all these other things. But you between your work on JSA and certainly Green Lantern, Legion of Superheroes, all these different books, you wound up creating the look for a huge amount of DC's characters that, by and large, you mentioned Kilowog, that are still active today. I think there's a huge section, particularly for the sci-fi, the space era of DC, where your drawings really make up that universe.
I think I have a good bit to do with that, and you were talking about the science fiction stuff. Basically, I was a Julie Schwartz science fiction fan. That's that was my basis in comics, and I tell people that I was a Green Lantern fan before the Green Lantern book because it was such a Julie Schwartz character. So it was what I was waiting for, and it always fit just fine with me to fit into that science fiction take on the characters.
And you got to work with Julie Schwartz at DC, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, I worked with Julie a few times. I did some Superman team-up books with him. I inked Kurt Swan on some stories about Superman in the future. Yeah, so I did some work with Julie.
What was it like meeting Julie and all that?
It was kind of a self-created caricature of himself. It was like, that's what they say. The best description of Stan, and Julie is from that generation. And so yeah, Julie was fun for me to deal with, and of course, I had read a lot of the old science fiction that he actually was around for when it was originally published. So we had some overlap there, and we would know what kind of stories we were talking about.
Yeah, and I can't believe we've gone this far in the interview without getting more in depth into your work on the Legion of Superheroes.
Yeah.
So I mean, I know you started. I think you inked one issue. I think it was like 227, and then you came in the 240s and did quite a few issues of Legion.
I did.
Yeah.
I came onto the Legion. There were I think there were three of us. There was one. I forget who the third one
Was
was.
James Sherman drawing?
Jim Sherman did a bunch. He did really good stuff. He could write.
Oh yeah.
But somehow I wound up being the one who was left standing after a while. Doing, oh, here's another one. Can you cut this one in? There was somebody else. There was another person who was in the rotation on that. It'll come to me somewhere. But so I wound up doing a bunch of the Legion.
Yeah. What'd you think of it? Because the usual response tends to be enjoying it, but the job was a lot because it was so many characters and it was very difficult to keep track of who dresses like what. And...
Absolutely. I've mentioned several times that when I was on the book, we'd get letters all the time that I put the wrong boots on the characters.
Fans never change.
Yeah.
And it was science fiction stuff. So, but it was kind of I don't know. It was kind of a romance in space.
Yeah.
It's just in the past few years, talking to Legion fans, that I've actually come to appreciate the Legion as much as I should have. But it was science fiction. They had creatures in space, and there was lots of romance. That was good.
Yeah. Were there any characters or aliens in the Legion that you more looked forward to drawing? Like, oh, I can get through this issue. There's a lot of this character or this alien in it. Or...
Well, for some reason, I took a real liking to Mon-El. I was always, I guess he was more a traditional Superboy type character, and he was Superboy in it as well. But I still like Mon-El a lot, and I like the original characters, Saturn Girl and that bunch. So
yeah.
I kind of had the ones I could kind of get a grip on.
Yeah.
And I read somewhere that you're doing this book that has a lot of characters complexity, but then I read that you said you would do between 2 and 3 pages a day. Is that right?
I did. I'm not sure if that was in the Legion, but there have been times when I would routinely do at least 2 and up to 3 pages a day.
Wow.
I could definitely do 2 pages of Green Lantern. So
that's incredible. Just to have, to have that kind of pace, and then kind of in the same the thing I read where you mentioned that you also didn't do much with assistants. Is that true?
No, Bruce Patterson helped me out fairly often, but other than Bruce, I never really had much in the way of assistants. My neighbor Paul Abrams, once I moved upstate, was around and helped me out on some Huntress stuff.
Yes.
I never really had any formal assistants. I guess I go into a room and don't want the distraction of somebody helping me.
Yeah, I just to have that kind of pace and largely be doing it on your own. I mean, that's incredible. And then again, like I mentioned before, just such prolific work that I was just going back through the last several weeks of comics coming out today from DC, and I'm just trying to see if the week has gone by where there's a character that wasn't one you created, and it's 2021. We're still there's at least one comic out that has got one of your characters in it that you helped put together. That's amazing.
So I think that's probably true.
Yeah. It's a huge footprint on DC in particular, and I mean the amount of names and people you work with. Gil Kane, back when you were working with Charlton.
Yeah, I was Gil's assistant for a year or so, and that was one. I was working on Charlton stuff, and I got a call out of the blue from Gil, and it says, I need somebody to lay out my books, and would you like to do that? And so, well, yeah, that was good. I broke down some Spider-Man, some Conan, some Ghost Rider. So I did basic breakdowns and layouts for Gil, so that he wouldn't have to actually figure the storytelling so much. He concentrate on the on the drawing. So, yeah.
And I mean, Gil's a legend. He's done and contributed to so many aspects of comics. I mean, even his work in the 80s and at DC. I think he did some great Superman stuff with Marv.
Oh, right.
Which was a different sort of style from when he was doing Spider-Man and even Green Lantern and all of that. He seemed to evolve over the years.
Right, and you go back to when he was Bernard Sachs was inking him on the science fiction stuff, the Julie Schwartz. What was that? The 50s?
It had to have been.
Yeah. So and all the science fiction stuff, I had come along with all of Gil's stuff. So it was another example of I just kind of fell into a spot where it was a good fit for me, and I got to where I could do a pretty good pastiche of Gil Kane. So
nice.
And there was a time when a book on the life story of the Flash, and Gil was doing that, and for some reason he couldn't finish that, so I came in to finish it in Gil style. So it's a useful skill sometimes.
Very nice. And we'll still talk to you more about DC, but just to kind of fast forward, so you mentioned kind of the comics you really enjoy working on. Dick Tracy, the comic strip, you're working on that today. This is still ongoing, and this has been going for about 10 years?
Yes.
Nice. Perfect. How is that different? We're talking about comic books and all the rest. You go to a comic strip. It's a different type of storytelling. But again, a big rogues gallery. Do you find is it much different, or like what are the differences for you?
I think the main thing for me is that with a comic book, you're composing in terms of a page, so lots of panels on one page. But with a strip, you're not. At least for me, I'm not composing in terms of the strip. I'm composing in terms of each panel. However, a story has to be clear in that panel, and eventually they come together and make a continuity. But the overall design approach is different from the two.
And you play with a huge gallery of characters. And talking about the Legion of Superheroes, I mean, Dick Tracy has as well just this massive rogues gallery and supporting cast. And have you had a chance to create more? Are you growing that universe as well?
We've created a bunch of our own characters. We bring back a lot of the old ones, and some of whom who have been dead for years, but now they're back. But we create our own characters. We have the Nitrate brother. Well, they're not really brother and sister, but they're a pair, and those are really good characters. We have a weird character called Double Up, who, when he's talking, always says everything twice. He's double up. He's double up.
Very nice. Very Dick Tracy.
Yeah. We had a character named Blockhead, who's a new one. And Sawtooth, who has artificial titanium teeth, who rips out people's throats.
Ish.
At this point, you can't show this very clearly in the strips, but
No, it went dark there. Yeah.
but kind of an unpleasant character. Yeah.
Were you a fan of Dick Tracy growing up, or was that something that came later on?
No, I think Chester Gould is my first influence.
Okay.
I could follow Dick Tracy in the newspapers before I could read. The graphics were so strong, so that whatever I come back to, Chester Gould and Dick Tracy is kind of the basis of what I do. So
That's great.
It's something I'd always wanted to do, and it just, again, it's kind of worked out.
I love the arc between doing this very high concept cosmic type work at DC and then the Dick Tracy world as well. But very immersive characters in both. Couldn't be more different though. I think in genre.
But there are overlaps. So some Dick Tracy villains. Broadway Bates was the basis for the Penguin.
Yeah.
So everybody swiped from everybody back in those days.
Yeah.
Actually, there was somebody doing a fan strip about a team up between Batman and Dick Tracy. When I started my strip, my take on Tracy. So there's overlaps, and I guess the street level superheroes like Batman and Huntress they overlap with Tracy's world. We had a Huntress villain called Lion Mane, who would have made an excellent Tracy villain. So it overlaps.
Nice. And what was it? While you were at DC, you met one of the others, Mike Gold, there, right?
Mike was the publicity manager, or
Okay.
he was in yeah, I guess that's what he was. He basically got promotions and such like, and I got to know Mike quite a bit there too. I did. He would have me do pages about coming characters. Oh yeah, the most notorious was the page I did for the coming explosion. What was a whole bunch of new books that were coming out, and then suddenly there was a big cutback at the cover.
Oh, yeah. DC Implosion, yeah.
Yes, you lived through the explosion and the implosion.
So I had basically gotten everybody in place for the implosion. But
how was what was the mood? You mentioned kind of having a better go of it at DC. It felt like maybe a more family kind of piece, and I'm fascinated by this. To take away back to Jeanette Con going and having that kind of brainstorming game night type thing, team building as you called it. How regularly did that happen? Was that monthly or weekly or?
It was monthly.
Monthly. That's amazing. That's some amazing coordination in a lot of. I mean, I think nowadays you hear kind of comic companies boasting about either setting up Zoom calls, which sound just terrible, but or we'll do a summit once a year. And to think of this team like every month going over and bouncing ideas off while playing games, that sounds like it would do the trick for team building and building good worlds.
Seemed to do it.
Yeah.
There were also various people, getting card games together and such like. Yeah, I think there was a good bit of overlap with people getting together.
Yeah, I mean, I like that plan. So you have this more maybe collegial kind of environment. People are working together. It's valuing kind of that kind of collaboration. When the implosion hit, lots of people have talked about it over the years, but what was the feeling within DC? Was it crisis? Was it how did people absorb it?
It was kind of like impending doom is here, and to a certain extent, that was about right.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of Marvel picked up a lot of DC's people right around then, so it kind of hit DC pretty good.
It feels like in the last year, we've seen similar. Of course, we've seen some cuts with the acquisition of Warner Media and DC into AT&T. There was this kind of similar vibe going on. Once again, Marvel's picking up a bunch of people, colorists and inkers, and just kind of artists across the board. It feels like they're living through that sort of again. It's like history is repeating itself to some extent.
Well, I'm not in contact with DC these days, so don't really. Actually, I'm not sure if I know more than 2 or 3 people who are there these days. So I couldn't give you information.
Well, what I'm struck by is that they went through this. Obviously, you continue to work after the implosion at DC, and you created a lot of you just continue to create universes and other things that. They made it through, I guess, this crisis.
Yeah.
And do you think is one of for that crisis? Do you think one of the reasons maybe they made it through is that they did have this maybe deeper bond as a company that you had people who were kind of looking out for each other, or do you think that played into it at all?
I think it was just kind of luck of the draw as to who was left around and who could find stuff at Marvel.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
okay.
And you, going back to Mike Gold, he then tapped you to be his art director at First Comics.
That's right. Yeah.
How did that all come about?
Well, like I said, I had done a bunch of stuff for Mike, and generally like being around Mike. He was a character. He just thought I might be interested in this new project, and he got the rights to a fantasy play called Warp, and built a comics company around adapting Warp. And brought in other properties as well. But as art director, I think my achievement was to prove that I had no managerial skills. But we managed to get the books out somehow. And, we had a good crew.
Yeah, you had a good. I mean, you were there for 3 years. Right, yep. and got to work with a huge lineup of creators. I mean, people who would have pretty big careers in the future.
I mean, certainly Howard Chaykin, Mike Grell, Steve Root. I mean, we had a good bunch.
Yeah, I mean, out the gate, more or less, First Comics, you had, John Sable Freelance, Grimjack, American Flag. I mean, all 3 of those alone, not to mention other things like Nexus and stuff that would come, were like seminal works that kind of really like defined the like growing independent comics in the 80s. I mean, we're talking about the Russo brothers are going to apparently adapt Grimjack into a show for Amazon. American Flag, obviously. I mean, that's always bouncing around in print. And Howard Chaykin had a new comic book come out this past week.
Howard is still remarkably prolific and still coming up with new ideas. Howard is my hero. We do have to get that clear. That of my cohort, Howard is my hero. He always had more ideas than anybody else, I just understood. I don't know, society. I think you live in the world. So Howard's my hero.
Another person I've heard that was your collaborator and somebody you liked is Fred Himbeck. Is that right?
Yes, Fred. Fred is one of a kind. Fred is the Jules Pfeiffer of comics.
I'm trying to picture a different crew than Howard Chaykin and Fred Himbeck. I mean, it just on the surface from a distance, I don't think you could get two different people, but both incredibly talented.
Absolutely, yes, and Fred is still working hard. So you talk about somebody who's drawn every character. Fred has he killed the Marvel universe. So he's
that's true. Before it was popular.
Yes, right.
No, and at First Comics you had Jim Starlin there. Was he? Did he overlap with your time at First? I don't remember when Dreadstar came out.
I don't remember having any direct dealings with Jim. I know we did Star Slayer, and that was Jim's character. Lennon Del Sol did those, and trying to remember if I did anything directly with Jim. I don't remember.
I think that came later because that started with Joe. Help me out here. That started with Epic, and then it moved.
Yeah,
to First.
There were a couple of things I think that started at either Epic or Eclipse, and ended up at First. But
that's right. The other way. That's right.
But what was it? Nexus, I think, started at Eclipse and went
or Capital, or
maybe it was Capital, but it was one of those. But yeah, there were a few. I think the discourse, and this is not to diminish the work of the people who founded Image Comics, but a lot of people act like Image Comics is when independent comics started in a big way in like the shops, and maybe they'll mention, and the Ninja Turtles a little bit before, but I mean, this is, First Comics is just about a full decade before Image, putting out stuff that's still relevant today, that still has an audience, that made it possible for there to even be an Image Comics.
Well, one thing to note is that at the time that the First Comics came together, Marvel and DC were pretty secure in the idea that they were the only people who actually could produce comic books in the process that was followed in those days with the 4 colors, hand separations, and dealing with chemical color plate, and all the printing had to be done in Sparta, Illinois. First Comics really were the first people who seriously challenged that, to show that there was just technically a possibility of other people doing comics. And I think we kind of opened up things for the independents that came along.
Yeah.
And as I recall, I mean, the First Comics did have newsstand distribution as well. I mean, I remember seeing these comics in grocery stores.
I think so, yeah.
Which was a little bit more unusual as an independent, of course. But, I mean, as Mike Grell, some of his work I remember was there. There were a few. But no, it did. I'm with Joe. We hear this all the time. Indies started with Image. And it's like, well, not really. Not really true on any level. Take nothing away from certainly what they did. I think that there was a lot of pretty amazing work, and I would say Image wouldn't have had the success it had if not for what happened in the 80s.
Yeah.
So you wind up, though, ultimately you leave First and you go back to DC, and you wind up there getting a pretty major Green Lantern run.
Right.
And was it different when you went back when you went back to DC? The company changed on you, or was it still pretty much what you remembered?
It was different. Certainly, Dick Giordano was kind of in charge of things when I came back. And I came back to a different set of people. I was working with Andy Helfer was my editor, and Andy was fun, but he was kind of hard to keep organized to get anything done. But I did come back to Steve Englehart on Green Lantern, which when I came back, I was expecting Len Wein to be writing Green Lantern, and Len was gone by the time I got back. And working with Steve was one of those things that worked out very well. I really liked Steve just kind of making up things on the fly and
Nice.
figuring out what's coming next. So and Steve had good ideas. Really expanding the Green Lantern Corps to. Bring in more of the galactic stuff, the space stuff. So I was kind of back in my best area there.
And I mean the results were incredible for that run. I think I'm curious, and I understand that of course if a title doesn't sell well, they can cancel, and lots of things can happen in a book. But as an artist working on these titles during this time period, how long? What kind of sense of the future did they give you? Did they talk in terms of a year run, or a 2-month run, or 5-year run? Like what would they tell you about that kind of thing?
Basically, you just got signed on to do the book forever until it was canceled that day. So.
Did they encourage? I mean, and the reason I'm asking is we've talked to a number of different creators who talk about having to live within a 3 to 6 month window where you really don't have much visibility beyond that, and maybe you don't even put a lot of things in play because you don't have a long-term commitment, so you have to do everything short. And reading your comics, and one of the things that always comes across is like these big ideas that maybe they didn't all get to, but you're putting in play year-long epic kind of ideas.
Definitely. Steve Englehart had plans for stories into the future, and that was what we were building toward. So we just kind of thought things would keep on going.
I'm just curious, and I mean, it's maybe not a fair question to ask you, but I'm trying to pinpoint when that changed exactly. That the comics stopped giving people kind of security is not the right word, but just this sense of like, go ahead and plan out 10 years. Shoot for the moon, do everything you can do. Life may change, we may pull the rug out from under you, and maybe that's happened so much that people are just kind of gun shy at this point. But
used to it. But it certainly, when the new 52 came in, I was doing Scooby-Doo around that time, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't doing the superhero books, but it seemed like if anybody got a run of 3 issues, that was a major achievement. That certainly that was a breaking point. That everything changed every other month.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a break between the old way of doing things and how everything's came through then.
It's just and funny is definitely the wrong word, but it's funny to me that you're the longevity of a good solid run where you can do a lot of invention and put a lot of things in play is now done for a comic strip for Dick Tracy and not in the comic books. So you're going on a 10-year run of Dick Tracy in a comic strip.
Yep, I just finished 10 years.
Yeah, and that seems a lot more stable and secure than comics. Just comic books. That's very weird to me to kind of wrap my head around.
course, with newspaper strips, you have to plan or keep in mind you may be in the dying days of newspapers. So it may all go away any day now. So,
you brought up Dick Giorgiano. How was it working with him or interacting with him when you came back? Like, what was he like? Because he was another legend in the industry.
Dick is generally very well beloved in the business, and lots of people speak highly of him. And I certainly admired his work, but I never meshed with him. It didn't really wasn't somebody that. Basically, my feeling was that Dick had a kind of a limited approach to what made a comic book, and my kind of cartoony, funny way of doing superheroes didn't overlap with what he had in mind. He never really tried to take me off things or anything like that, but he didn't allow for the kind of funny sort of thing in a serious serious book. So I didn't have any trouble with Dick, but I never really meshed with him.
Was there ever a feeling that there was kind of like a pre-crisis way of doing things and wanting to evolve in sort of a post-crisis? Because we also saw Kurt Swan get a lot less work after Crisis, and some other major artists from that were doing it beforehand, and it seemed like there was a move to make the art more, I guess maybe realistic. I don't know if that's the right word, but make the art look a certain way, and then it seemed to go even further after Image, where you had. You see it in like the Death of Superman, where you had the art then it kept getting pushed in a certain way. Did you ever get a feeling that like those kind of things were going on?
Yeah, I guess so. It's certainly a way that I didn't quite keep up with.
I think so. You mentioned earlier, by the time the New 52 had rolled around, you're doing Scooby-Doo. You're doing more of the younger reader work at DC. Was that fun to do? Kind of that draw. I mean, I'm just trying. You're going from science fiction, high concept, huge world building. You're doing Dick Tracy with this huge cast of characters. You're doing Scooby-Doo. I think I'm just looking up some of your covers, grabbing some art here, and like I do, you could claim you've drawn pretty much everyone in all the different fields.
Well, up to a certain point.
Sure, up to a certain point, but I mean the library just keeps going. It's there's so much.
Yeah, but Scooby was another odd thing I just fell into. I was doing Guy Gardner, and then suddenly I wasn't, and I was walking down the hall, and my pal Marty Pasco was in charge of special projects, and they were doing Scooby, and Bronwyn Taggart was editing Scooby and was kind of rotating Scooby around. Different people wanted to, do an occasional Scooby, and she rotated several my way, and somehow I wound up being the regular artist on Scooby. So I did. I had Scooby art in at least 100 issues of Scooby-Doo. So I really didn't know much about Scooby when I started, but I had a stack of model sheets that Alex Toth had drawn. So that's what I picked up on that, and Alex had done some Hot Wheels books for DC, which Dick Giordano had inked very nicely. So I had. So I was doing best I could an Alex Toth version of Scooby-Doo, and that lasted for a good long while.
Yeah, that was another long run. Your career has a lot of runs all through it. Your time in Green Lantern. It's funny. Joe and I have talked to the the current writer of Green Lantern, Jeff Thorne, who just relaunched it. I know he's a big fan of your work. Whenever we show kind of those classic covers, he's always honing right in on that. I know big fan of E-Man. And a lot of these characters, it's we got to get you to do a variant cover, something for the new Green Lantern series somehow. That would bring some nice things together. But
well, I did have a page in the 80th 80-year anniversary issue of Green Lantern. So
yes. You also did, I believe this was through an imprint of DC. I think Paradox Press. You did a Family Man.
Right.
And that was in the mid-90s. I want to say maybe early mid-90s or around then. I'm trying to think of exactly when. Maybe 93, 95 in that area.
Sounds.
And how did that come about?
Well, I said I had worked for Andy Helfer on Green Lantern, and Andy was putting together this graphic novel line. I think the original idea was to bring in writers who weren't comics people, but to put them together with comics artists to do graphic novels. And Andy wanted to know actually, originally I was supposed to do one with Pete Hamill, but Pete never got his script in. So Andy says, "Well, Jerome Jarrett is a big name. So would you like to do something with him?" I said, "Hey, cool." And we did this actual. It's actually a graphic novel. It reads. It has complexity, I think, of like an actual novel. It's it's slightly in the future when the Catholic Church and the mob are in a fight for control of New York City, and that was really a lot of fun to do, and it just got republished by It's Alive Press, so it's actually available. And I think if you look at it, the art is done as though it's a comic strip. It's 4 boxes on a page with occasionally a full page, which would be like your Sunday.
Yeah.
So it was done like a comic strip, and it was done with the thinking of a novel. So I think it was really an achievement to get that done, and it was a lot of fun. I'm very pleased to have worked with Jerome Jarrett.
Yes.
It's incredible. Is there any character or creator? I know this is such the generic question you've been asked before, but is there somebody you always wanted to work with, or a character you want to work on that didn't you get a chance to do much with?
I always wanted to have a run on Doctor Strange. Because I love Ditko, and that's pure Ditko. That's like what he did for Charlton. That's my basic thinking is Doctor Strange, and I was never around when it was up for grabs or anything, and so I never had a shot. And I guess the only other thing is I would have liked a fairly long run on Superman at some point. Just to get to know Superman. I don't think I understand him, and I would, maybe with Marv, that would have been fun if I had been around for that. So I think those are my two missed characters.
You just said something really interesting. That's awesome. But you talked about getting to know Superman. And you would have liked a long run to kind of get to know the character. Is that how it worked with some of the other books that you'd be put on? That you kind of learned the character by creating them issue after issue, that you came to understand them more? Is that common for how it works?
I don't know. It's certainly how I work. The more I'm around, more I'm around the character, the more I understand the character. And then how the character moves, how the character thinks. sometimes you click on the character right off the bat, and sometimes you have to get to know them. And Superman's is one I never got to know.
Yeah, I love that. I love the thought, because I mean, people think, visually getting comfortable with drawing the character, but it's more than that. It's actually kind of getting into their head and how they tick. And well, who was hard to kind of you finally got there, but who did you have trouble with?
Well, it's funny. I've done many versions of Batman, so and I'm comfortable with lots of them. The one I was always most comfortable one is the Earth 2 one that I killed.
So comfortable you killed him.
But I never really got to know some of the modern takes on Batman. I kind of clicked really well with the animated version.
Oh.
So, but trying to think who would I? Well, obviously several of the Legion characters I never did figure out because I could never get the right boots on them.
Yes, it's all the boots every time. It goes back to fashion every time with comics.
It goes back to fashion. Yeah, so you have to get used to them.
Yeah.
Did you ever get they'd always send in fan letters and stuff, and like you mentioned with like the boots and stuff like that. What kind of reactions were there to characters like Huntress or like Power Girl and people like that from fans?
Well, obviously with Power Girl, there was attention to her attributes.
Yes.
What?
Huntress, I think Huntress hit a good note right off the bat. I think Paul and I knew who she was when she started, so there was not getting to know the character, and the letters kind of picked up on that. I think Huntress had her own fandom kind of from the first time she showed up. So
yeah,
those letters were good.
Nice.
Do you? There's a lot of talk and not to wade completely into it, but just kind of this butting heads between creators and fans these days. There's a lot of talk about that. I think there's, by the way, more talk than reality. People like to make a big deal out of it. But you mentioned these letters, people kind of writing in, being upset about the boots, which sounds so charming in light of the arguments that people have today. Was there a lot of angst, or was there a lot of, was there a lot of you do something that the customers really don't like, and then you get this deluge of mail of like, why did you kill Batman? Or were there those moments?
There were those moments, and that was one of them. So, oh yeah. Well, why did we kill Batman? Paul Evans said, Joe Orlando was about to retire, and he needed. It would be nice if he had a big event for a book he was editing to take him out. So we killed Batman for Joe.
There you go.
It's his fault, really. Okay. But the messages of these fans, was it more like, I cannot believe you put the wrong boots on this person, or was it truly like, I will never read comics again, you have ruined it for? I mean, like, what was it? And did people sit around kind of reading these things and laughing, or what was what happened?
I don't think I saw a lot of that. We'll never,
yeah. Not that dramatic.
Not that dramatic. Yeah,
I'm picturing dramatic readings over the cape, sir, has 3 inches shorter than the last issue, and I, for one, am outraged. It's nothing like.
Yes, right.
Yeah,
so you have to have somebody to keep you honest.
Yeah, yeah. I love it. I love
it.
I want to be respectful of your time and not take all of your afternoon, but I mean, I love this. I mean, again, I'm struck by, and it sounds like such a silly point, but how many characters you had a hand in creating, and the fact that you can't go a week without seeing one of your creations, one of your character designs in the comics today. I mean, decades later, these characters still coming out, and now we're seeing them in the movies. Is is it weird when you watch these characters make this transition to the big screen, and now these like the Huntress? You had this hand in creating the character, and she's appeared now many times in different formats.
It's really cool. I like to see something I've drawn out as just a little drawing, and suddenly it's like a 3D person, a 3D, and that was CGI. Anybody I've drawn can be a 3D character, and it's the same with cosplayers. I love meeting cosplayers who are doing my characters, and when you meet Kilowog in the flesh, it's impressive. So
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, we're gonna get. They have that Green Lantern show in a year or two, and Kilowog's supposed to be one, and Guy Gardner are supposed to be big characters in that show. So we'll get to see with that. But cosplayers, has it been tough? The lack of conventions now for more than a year. Is it? Do you miss that?
I do. Yeah, I like getting out with the fans, and the cosplayers, and there are people I got accustomed to meeting at shows, and I like seeing them, find out there are characters that have grown up in front of my table.
Yeah.
They're grown people now who are just starting out fans. When I was doing shows years ago, and I do miss it. And somebody asked me somewhere along the line, did I keep up with current books? And I said, oh, sure I do. I'm up with those. And it hit me. No, I'm not, because I see things at shows, and see books, then see the artist, and I know what I knew what they were doing a year ago, but I really haven't kept up in this last year. I know what's happening at Dick Tracy.
I think that's true of everybody. We're seeing a splintering. I'm very confident you don't remember me, but I met you at the New York City Comic Con. It's got to be about 10 years ago, and shook your hand, and I miss those interactions very much. And it has been tough this last year.
It has.
So it's just on conventions very quickly. Actually, kind of different. Do you do commissions? Do you sell original art? Is there anything like that where if somebody wants something of yours, do you still do that?
I do that. Most things are through Spencer Beck, the artist's choice, and I'm going to be putting a whole bunch of Dick Tracy art up on the artist's choice pretty soon now. So don't have a lot of the superhero stuff left.
No, that's cool. I hope that I certainly Joe and I often go through comics. We have this bit where we talk about comics that came out this week in previous years, and we kind of show some of the covers, and we've almost
on Facebook.
There's almost always one of yours there. And it's every time it's what strikes me as kind of the action, the storytelling, and this is just the cover, but it's always very, very distinctive and excellent. And
thank you.
So Joe, I wanted to thank you for your time here today, and just spending all these times. Joe Corallo, any other questions? Am I missing anything? I know we've had a great chat here.
No, this is great. I think we covered a lot. I'm sure we could go on for hours and hours and hours. But no, I really appreciate your time. I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing you at a convention eventually.
Yep.
It's always great seeing you and Hillary at a show. And other than that, is there maybe a favorite person you got, a favorite artist you got to ink, or a favorite inker on your art?
Okay, name two of my favorite inkers. I did also favorite writer, favorite story was the autobiography of Bruce Wayne. The love story of Bruce Wayne and Catwoman. And that was written by Alan Brennert and was inked by George Freeman. The only time George ever inked me, and he totally got the idea of the '40s feeling that this is family history, and that's what the two of them got. And the other inker, well, once I get going, Bill Sienkiewicz inked me a couple of times, and I totally love that.
That's a good combo.
Yeah.
Orazio Attalini, the excellent Argentinian inker, inked Femme Noir stories I did that Chris Mills wrote. And that looked, by the time Orazio had finished, it looked like 1940s pulp illustrations. And everything I'd done was there, but there was so much more. And
Nice.
like, I've said this before, a really good inker teaches you something about yourself. And those three definitely have.
Nice.
That's awesome. I love it. Well, Joe, other than, just, as you mentioned, and we'll put some links up where people can get a hold of you to maybe get some art or do commissions. Is there anything else you'd like to us? If somebody wants to learn more about you, grab some of your work, they love the conversation, where should they go?
Well, you can put in orders through Spencer for the artist's choice. I have a website, www.joestaton.com. I haven't kept it up to date, but there's a fair amount of art to look at there. And you can find on Go Comics / Dick Tracy. You can follow Tracy daily, and there's a nice archive. Every strip that Mike Curtis and I have done is up there, and there's some before us with Dick Loper. So if you want to catch up on Dick Tracy, this is the place to do it.
I absolutely, definitely, I would encourage people to go do that and to check out some of your work. Again, there's a lot of it, so you can.
There is a lot of it. Yes, 50 years, there is a lot of it.
Just amazing, and such a great pleasure talking with you today. And I just wanted to say thank you for spending this time with us, and definitely all the art. I mean, it's the thing for a lot of customers, I think, fans, people who spend time with this stuff, they wind up getting very attached to people like yourself because they spend hours and hours, viewing what you did. They your drawings are going into their memories, and it's one of those magical things about comics. So thank you very much for everything you've done.
Well, thank you for having me in.
Great. Thanks.
I hope we can talk to you real soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Have a good one. Bye.